Have you ever wondered what secrets a forgotten locker might hold? Imagine a dusty, rusted metal door, tucked away in a corner of a school hallway, its combination lost to time. For years, it stood silent, its contents a mystery, until one day, a principal decided to open it. What was inside? A forgotten love letter? A long-lost diary? Or something far more significant? This isn't just a story about forgotten objects, it's about uncovering truths that have been hidden for over a decade. In this video, we're going to take you on a journey to discover what was inside that locker and how it solved a mystery that had puzzled a community for years. But before we dive in, let me ask you this. Have you ever kept a secret so well that even you forgot about it? A secret that, if revealed, could change everything? That's what we're about to explore. Stick with us, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why this forgotten locker was the key to unlocking a mystery that had been buried for far too long. Now, let's set the scene. It's a typical day at Jefferson High School, a place where the echoes of laughter and footsteps fill the halls. But hidden in the back storage room, behind stacks of old gym equipment and forgotten yearbooks, stands a locker. Not just any locker, but one that had been sealed shut for years, its combination lost and its purpose forgotten. No one remembered who it belonged to or what it contained. It was as if it had never existed. Then, one day, Principal Thompson, while sorting through old records, stumbled upon a note. It was a simple piece of paper, yellowed with age, tucked inside a dusty folder. The note was a request from a former student, asking that their locker be preserved and never opened. The reason? It was a secret, a personal one, that they weren't ready to share. Intrigued and respectful of the student's wishes, Principal Thompson decided to honor the request. The locker remained untouched, its contents a mystery to all. But as the years passed, curiosity grew. Who was this student? What was their secret? And why had they chosen to leave it behind? Fast forward to the present day. The school is undergoing renovations, and the forgotten locker is finally being cleared out. The maintenance team, unaware of its significance, begins the process of unlocking it. As the lock clicks open, a wave of anticipation fills the air. What will they find inside? Inside the locker, among a pile of old textbooks and a faded varsity jacket, lies a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages are filled with handwritten notes, sketches, and photographs. At first glance, it seems like the musings of a typical teenager. But as they delve deeper, patterns begin to emerge. The entries are dated, spanning several years, and they tell a story of love, loss, and longing. But that's not all. Tucked between the pages is a photograph, one that doesn't belong. It's a picture of a teacher, someone who had been a part of the school for years, but had mysteriously disappeared without a trace. No one knew what had happened to them, and their absence had left a void in the school community. As the pieces of the puzzle start to come together, it becomes clear that this journal holds the key to understanding the teacher's disappearance. The entries describe a secret relationship, one that had to be kept hidden due to the rules of the institution. But as the relationship deepened, so did the risks. The journal ends abruptly, with no explanation, leaving the mystery unsolved until now. The discovery of this journal doesn't just answer questions about the teacher's disappearance, it opens up a whole new set of questions. Who was the student who left this behind? What happened to them? And how did they come to possess such intimate knowledge of the teacher's life? As we delve deeper into the story, we'll uncover more about the teacher's past, the student who held the secret, and the events that led to the journal being locked away for so many years. We'll hear from former classmates, faculty members, and even the maintenance team who unlocked the locker. Each piece of the puzzle brings us closer to understanding the truth. But there's more to this story than just a forgotten locker and a lost journal. It's about the secrets we keep, the truths we hide, and the lengths we go to protect those we care about. It's about the connections we form and the impact they have, even years after we've moved on. So, as we continue this journey, I want you to think about your own secrets. What would happen if they were uncovered? Would they change the way people see you? Would they change the way you see yourself? This story isn't just about a teacher and a student, it's about all of us and the mysteries we carry with us. Similar Web. +1. The New Yorker. +1. Stay tuned as we unravel the layers of this decades-old mystery. The truth is out there, waiting to be discovered. And by the end of this video, you'll have the answers you've been waiting for. But remember, this is just the beginning. The deeper we go, the more questions arise. Who was the student who left the journal? What happened to them? And what other secrets lie hidden within the walls of Jefferson High School? As the faded journal lay open, its pages whispered secrets that had been buried for over a decade. The words, written in a hurried yet elegant script, chronicled a forbidden relationship between a beloved teacher and a student, a bond that defied the very rules that governed their lives. The entries spoke of stolen moments, shared glances, and a love that could never be publicly acknowledged. But as the journal's story unfolded, it became clear that this was no ordinary tale of teenage infatuation. The teacher, once a fixture in the school's halls, had vanished without a trace years ago, leaving behind only questions and a legacy of whispered rumors. The student's identity remained a mystery, their name never mentioned in the journal, leaving readers to wonder, who were they, and what had become of them? The discovery of the journal sent ripples through the school community. Former students, now adults, were drawn back to the halls they once roamed, eager to uncover the truth behind the teacher's disappearance. Some recalled the teacher as a mentor who had inspired them to pursue careers in education, while others remembered a figure shrouded in mystery, whose sudden absence had left a void in the school's culture. The principal, who had been unaware of the journal's existence until its recent unveiling, found himself grappling with the implications of its contents. His initial decision to honor the student's request to keep the locker sealed had been driven by respect for privacy, but now, faced with the revelations within the journal, he questioned whether that decision had been the right one. As the investigation into the teacher's disappearance deepened, new leads emerged. A former colleague, who had once been close to the teacher, revealed that they had been acting strangely in the weeks leading up to their disappearance. They had withdrawn from social circles, stopped attending faculty meetings, and seemed preoccupied with something or someone that they refused to discuss. The colleague speculated that the teacher had been involved in a secret relationship, but without concrete evidence, it remained mere conjecture. Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A maintenance worker, who had been employed at the school during the time of the teacher's disappearance, came forward with a startling revelation. He claimed to have overheard a conversation between the teacher and the student in a secluded part of the school late one evening. The conversation, he said, was heated, with the teacher expressing fear about the consequences of their relationship being discovered. The worker had been too far away to hear the specifics, but the tone had been unmistakable: desperation and fear. The discovery of the journal had opened a Pandora's box of emotions and questions. Former students began to share their memories, some recalling the teacher's kindness and dedication, while others spoke of a more enigmatic figure, whose personal life was a mystery. The school's administration, once unaware of the depth of the teacher's personal life, now found themselves at the center of a controversy that threatened to overshadow the school's reputation. As the investigation continued, the community grappled with complex questions about morality, privacy, and the boundaries between personal and professional lives. The teacher's disappearance, once thought to be a simple case of someone leaving town, had evolved into a tangled web of secrets, lies, and unspoken truths. The journal, once a forgotten relic, had become the key to unraveling a mystery that had eluded the community for years. But even as the pieces began to fall into place, new questions arose. Was the teacher's disappearance voluntary, or had something more sinister occurred? Had the student been complicit in the disappearance, or were they also a victim of circumstances beyond their control? And perhaps most haunting of all, had the love story chronicled in the journal been a catalyst for events that no one could have predicted? The answers remained elusive, hidden within the pages of the journal and the memories of those who had known the teacher and the student. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that the truth was more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The lines between right and wrong, love and obsession, had blurred, leaving behind a trail of questions that only the passage of time and the courage of those involved could hope to answer. And so, the mystery of the forgotten locker continued to unfold, its secrets slowly coming to light, one revelation at a time. The community, once united in their ignorance, now found themselves divided by the truths that had been hidden for so long. The teachers' legacy, once defined by their contributions to education, was now being redefined by the love story that had remained a secret for over a decade. And as the final pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, the question remained, would the truth set them free, or would it forever change the way they viewed the past? Just when it seemed like things were beginning to make sense, when the pieces of the mystery felt like they were finally starting to form a full picture, everything took a strange and unsettling turn. Principal Thompson, now deeply involved in trying to understand what really happened all those years ago, decided to consult the district archives to see if any disciplinary records or past complaints had ever been filed against the missing teacher. He hoped to find more context, maybe something that would explain why a respected educator would suddenly vanish without so much as a goodbye. But when he got there, he found that the entire section of staff files from that year was inexplicably missing. Not just the teacher's records, but files for multiple staff members. It was as if a whole chapter of the school's history had been deliberately wiped clean. He immediately reported it, but the district shrugged it off as likely a clerical error during past digital transitions. Something didn't sit right about that explanation. This wasn't some casual oversight, these were physical files that had been catalogued for decades. Adding to the tension, a former student named Riley came forward after hearing about the journal on social media. She messaged the principal privately, claiming she had known the student who wrote the journal but insisted on meeting in person and off campus. At a quiet cafe a few blocks away from the school, Riley recounted how her friend, she only referred to him as Jay, had confided in her back in senior year about a complex and very adult situation with a teacher. She remembered Jay being visibly anxious in the months leading up to graduation, constantly checking over his shoulder, avoiding certain hallways, and skipping class more frequently. Riley admitted she never pushed for details back then because she thought it was just senior stress. But now, looking back, she believed something far more serious had been happening. When Principal Thompson asked if she knew where Jay was now, her face went pale. "He left town right after graduation," she said. "Didn't say goodbye to anyone. He told me he needed to disappear." What made things even stranger was that the very next morning, the journal, the key piece of evidence at the center of this unfolding mystery, went missing from the locked drawer in the principal's office. Only two people had the keys, the principal and the vice principal, Ms. Alvarez, who had always been considered dependable, by the book, and deeply invested in the school's well-being. She expressed complete shock and denied any involvement. But Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that someone was deliberately trying to bury this story. Security footage offered no clues. The cameras that covered the office hallway had, conveniently, been down for maintenance. Again, the district offered up what sounded like a harmless explanation, but it was the second coincidence in less than a week that conveniently derailed the investigation. As rumors started to swirl among former students and teachers now reconnecting online, many of them using TikTok and YouTube to share their own fragments of memory, another name kept surfacing: Mr. Kent, a former chemistry teacher who had left the school a few months after the disappearance. At the time, his exit had seemed unremarkable, chalked up to a better job offer in another state. But now people were remembering strange things about him: how he always seemed to be around the missing teacher, how he had an unusual interest in student relationships, how he'd often been seen in the teacher's lounge having hushed arguments. Some even said he was jealous. Theories began to spread quickly, fueled by hashtags like #LockerMystery, #SchoolSecrets, and #VanishedTeacher. When Principal Thompson tried to contact Mr. Kent, he discovered that Kent's phone number had been disconnected and his current place of employment was unclear. His trail had gone cold, like someone who didn't want to be found. At this point, the principal began to receive anonymous notes in his mailbox, handwritten, no return address. The first one read, "You're not ready for the truth. Some doors should stay locked." It wasn't just ominous, it felt personal. The second note, received just a few days later, was even more disturbing. "Stop digging. You think this is about one teacher. It's not. You have no idea what you're waking up." Now under pressure from the school board, with social media attention growing and local news beginning to sniff around, the principal started to feel truly isolated. Even Ms. Alvarez began acting differently, more withdrawn, more cautious. She stopped asking questions, avoided eye contact, and even warned Thompson, cryptically, that there were people who'd do anything to keep the past in the past. When he pressed her for more, she simply said, "This goes higher than either of us. Be careful." Then came the most shocking twist so far. A student photo from the class of 2011 surfaced on an alumni Facebook page, one that showed the missing teacher, surrounded by students, smiling in what looked like a normal yearbook candid. But something was off. A closer look revealed someone standing just at the edge of the frame. Not looking at the camera. Watching the teacher. That person's face wasn't recognizable at first, but when enhanced, it bore a striking resemblance to someone currently working at the school. Someone trusted. Someone very much involved in the current investigation. And just like that, everything you thought you knew about this mystery suddenly felt wrong again. Because if that person was there back then, watching silently from the shadows, what else have they been hiding? As Principal Thompson stared at the enhanced photograph, his thoughts spiraled. The person on the edge of that image, only half visible, appeared to be none other than Mr. David Rowe, the current head of security at Jefferson High. It didn't make any sense. Rowe had always claimed to have joined the school just 6 years ago, long after the teacher's disappearance. His personnel records confirmed it. But there he was, unmistakably present in a photograph from 2011, standing close enough to suggest familiarity, far enough to seem like he didn't want to be seen. That single image cast doubt on everything Thompson had come to believe about who could be trusted and who might have been lying all along. Before he could confront Rowe, Thompson received a late-night text from an unknown number. It simply read, "You're digging in the wrong place." The fire didn't erase everything. It was the first direct reference to an event long considered unrelated to the mystery, a small fire that had broken out in the school library during the summer of 2012, just months after the teacher vanished. At the time, the fire had been blamed on faulty wiring, and though it damaged part of the records room adjacent to the library, it wasn't treated as arson. But now, that message suggested otherwise. Suddenly, the missing staff files, the altered personnel records, the gaps in student records from that period, they all started to look less like mistakes and more like intentional sabotage. It raised a chilling new question. Was someone trying to destroy evidence tied to that forgotten locker long before anyone even thought to open it? Meanwhile, across town, Riley, the former student who'd spoken with Thompson about Jay, received something even more disturbing. Arriving in an unmarked envelope with no return address, it was a photocopy of one of Jay's old assignments from senior year, a short story he had written for an English class. On its surface, it read like a moody piece of teenage fiction about a student torn between two worlds. But scrawled in red ink across the top were words she didn't remember seeing before: "Secrets are safest in silence." More unsettling was what came with the story, a Polaroid photo of Riley herself, taken recently, clearly without her knowledge, from outside the coffee shop where she had met with Principal Thompson. It wasn't just creepy. It was threatening. Someone knew she'd talked, and someone wanted her to stop. Now frightened but refusing to back down, Riley called Thompson and begged him to meet again. She brought the photo and the letter, and together they reviewed the story, searching for hidden meaning. In one paragraph, a detail stood out. The narrator described a room beneath the gym, a place where nobody hears what happens, not even the ghosts. At first it seemed like metaphor, but Thompson remembered that during renovations years ago, workers had uncovered sealed-off maintenance tunnels under the school, once used for piping and electrical work. Most were blocked off or collapsed, but one had supposedly connected to a basement room that had long been abandoned. Thompson wondered if this could be the place referenced in the story, a room no one had thought to investigate. But before they could act, the school's IT technician, Brian, who had been quietly helping Thompson recover corrupted security footage and scan old backups, went missing. He stopped replying to emails and didn't show up to work. A call to his apartment went unanswered, and his voicemail was full. What was especially strange was that, earlier that week, he'd excitedly told Thompson he had recovered a set of encrypted files from the school's old hard drives, files labeled with the missing teacher's initials. He never got the chance to share them. Thompson rushed to the tech room, hoping Brian had left something behind. Inside, he found the drawers ransacked, monitors left on but frozen, and a flash drive snapped in half on the floor, like someone wanted to make sure nothing ever came to light. It wasn't just about a love story anymore. It wasn't just about one teacher's disappearance. The further they went, the more it became clear, this wasn't a single mystery, but a chain of interconnected events, stretching back years, involving people in positions of power and authority who had something to hide. Motives were no longer obvious. Even Ms. Alvarez, who had begun acting more distant, now seemed emotionally torn. She quietly handed Thompson a key one afternoon, a small, weathered one with no label, saying only, "You'll know where it fits when you're ready." When he asked what she meant, she looked at him with something between guilt and fear, and whispered, "You think it started with the locker. But it didn't. And now, everything's shifting again." The audience is left not just questioning who they can trust, but what story they're really being told. Was the locker a smokescreen for something bigger? Was the teacher's relationship a distraction from a deeper conspiracy? And why do so many people seem to know more than they're saying, but are too afraid to speak? What Thompson doesn't know yet, what Riley is starting to suspect, and what viewers can almost feel coming, is that the most important clue might not be in the locker, or the journal, or even in the missing files. It might be in something that's been right in front of them the entire time, hidden in plain sight. But to see it, they'll have to dig deeper, risk more, and prepare for the possibility that the truth they're chasing might change everything they thought they knew, not just about the past, but about the people standing right next to them now. Just when it felt like every shadow had been examined and every clue dissected, a revelation came that cracked the entire foundation of the story wide open, and it didn't come from some anonymous tip, recovered file, or hidden room. It came from Ms. Alvarez. After weeks of acting increasingly distant, weighed down by something she refused to say out loud, she finally asked Principal Thompson to meet her at the old school auditorium, the part of the building that had been closed off during renovations. The place still smelled like sawdust and aged velvet, the stage lights long dead, but she led him up to the balcony where, years ago, staff had sometimes gone for quiet lunches or private phone calls. She was visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she reached into her coat and pulled out a faded envelope. Inside were photos, at least a dozen, clearly taken from surveillance cameras that no longer existed. They showed the missing teacher, but not with the student everyone believed they'd been involved with. Instead, the teacher was meeting repeatedly with someone else entirely, a district official. A man named Harold Green, who, at the time, served on the school board and oversaw disciplinary reviews. The images showed them together at odd hours, often in isolated spots, the side lot behind the gym, the fire exit by the boiler room, even what looked like an off-campus diner. It wasn't just casual conversation. Their body language was tense, sometimes intimate, sometimes confrontational. Alvarez admitted she'd been given the photos years ago by a source she never named, someone who told her to hold on to them and stay quiet. She'd always suspected there was more to the teacher's disappearance than a broken relationship or some personal shame, but she had no idea just how deep it went. "Everyone assumed it was about the student," she said quietly. "That's what we were led to believe. That's what we were supposed to believe." The implications were staggering. If the relationship at the heart of the journal had been a misdirection, then everything Thompson and Riley had been chasing was only part of the story. The teacher hadn't just been in danger because of a forbidden romance, they may have uncovered something far more dangerous. Suddenly, the fire in the library made more sense. So did the missing records, the encrypted files, the vanishing IT technician. The teacher wasn't the subject of a scandal. They were the threat to someone else's secret. But it didn't stop there. As Thompson left the auditorium, still reeling from the discovery, his phone buzzed with an email from an anonymous account. Attached was a low-resolution scan of a student file, one that was supposedly destroyed in the fire. It belonged to someone named Jordan Wells. Date of birth, school records, extracurriculars, it all checked out. Except, Jordan's student ID photo was unmistakably familiar. It was Jay. The same Jay Riley had described. The same Jay from the journal. Only this file showed that Jordan had withdrawn from Jefferson High 4 months before graduation and 2 weeks before the teacher vanished. That detail had never come up before. Riley had sworn they graduated. So how had she gotten it so wrong? He called Riley immediately. She didn't answer. He tried again, and this time she picked up, but her voice was strange, distant. "You shouldn't have seen that," she said. That wasn't supposed to resurface. When he asked what she meant, there was a long pause on the other end. "There's something I didn't tell you," she finally admitted. Jay wasn't just my friend. I helped them disappear. And I wasn't the only one. The line went dead. In that single moment, everything shifted. The narrative the audience had followed so far about a missing teacher, a mysterious locker, a forbidden relationship, now looked like a carefully crafted illusion. The teacher hadn't run away because of shame or scandal. They had vanished because they'd discovered something that threatened people in power. Jordan hadn't been a victim, they may have been part of the cover-up. And Riley, the one person who seemed to be helping, might be entangled in something far more complicated. Questions exploded. Why did the district allow the story to remain buried for so long? Who really orchestrated the fire that erased years of records? Was Mr. Rowe's presence in that 2011 photo a coincidence or proof of a long-term surveillance operation? And most importantly, if the teacher and Jordan hadn't just disappeared, where are they now? Because as it turns out, someone has been watching everything. Not just the investigation. Not just the school. But the people digging too deep. The Journal may have started this story, but what it exposed might only be the beginning of something far more dangerous. The days that followed were heavier than any the principal had experienced in his 2 decades in education. The school that had once felt like a place of order, filled with schedules and certainty, now buzzed with an undercurrent of paranoia. Every hallway held echoes of suspicion, and every familiar face felt like a question mark. Thompson was no longer sleeping. Not properly. He'd begun checking the locks on his office 3 or 4 times before leaving for the night, and even then, he'd sometimes return hours later just to be sure. The Journal was gone. Brian, the tech assistant, was still missing. Riley had gone silent. And the truth, the real truth, felt like it was slipping further away just as he got closer to it. Then came the visit from David Rowe. It happened just after school let out, when the building was at its quietest. Rowe stepped into Thompson's office without knocking, the look on his face unreadable. He didn't sit. He didn't offer pleasantries. He simply closed the door and placed something on the principal's desk, a printed email, unsigned, with only a sentence on it. He's risking lives for something that died a long time ago. Thompson looked up, his voice low, but steady. Is this from you? Rowe shook his head, slowly, then leaned in, speaking just above a whisper. You're not just uncovering old secrets anymore, he said. You're waking up people who will do anything to keep those secrets buried. This is your last warning. And just like that, he left, as quickly as he'd arrived. It was the first time Thompson realized just how alone he truly was. Everyone he thought he could trust, Alvarez, Riley, even Rowe, had either gone quiet or turned cryptic. He wasn't sure who was trying to protect him, who was threatening him, or if there was even a difference anymore. The breaking point came 3 nights later, when Thompson returned to his apartment to find the front door slightly ajar. Nothing appeared to be stolen. Nothing obvious, anyway. But he noticed a detail out of place. His family photo, the one with his late wife and daughter, had been turned face down. It was subtle, deliberate, just enough to send a clear message. We were here. You're not safe. That night, he didn't sleep at all. He sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the flipped photo, and finally did something he'd been dreading. He called his daughter, who was away at college in Ohio, and told her to stay with a friend for a while. He didn't explain everything. Just that he was working on something difficult and didn't want her to worry. But even as he spoke, his voice cracked, because deep down he knew what this meant. The line between his professional life and his personal one had officially been crossed. The people behind this, whoever they were, weren't just cleaning up old mistakes. They were actively watching, ready to strike if he stepped any further out of line. And then came the ultimatum. Delivered in person, by a woman he didn't recognize, in the parking lot of a grocery store just outside of town. She was calm, collected, dressed in business attire like she could have worked for the district or the city. But what she said wasn't bureaucratic. It was clear, cold, and absolute. You have 2 options, she told him, as if she were reciting a script. You can walk away. Stop asking questions. Let the story stay where it belongs, in the past. Or, you can keep going, and risk everything. Your job. Your daughter. Your life. What's the truth worth to you, Principal Thompson? He didn't answer her. He couldn't. She left a manila envelope on the hood of his car and walked away without looking back. Inside were photographs, his daughter at her college dorm, himself in his office, Riley entering a small clinic on the edge of town. None of them were threatening on the surface, but the message was unmistakable. We see you. We see everyone. The pressure had never been higher. The stakes had never been more personal. And for the first time, he felt himself wavering. Not because he doubted the importance of what he was doing, but because now he had to choose between pursuing the truth and protecting the people he loved most. Alvarez hadn't returned his last 2 calls. The key she'd given him sat untouched in his desk, its purpose still unclear. He had one lead left, one possible door he hadn't yet opened. But now he had to ask himself the question no one ever wants to face: if getting to the bottom of this means someone he cares about could get hurt, is it worth it? Or has this mystery, buried for a decade, already claimed enough? The truth was right there, just out of reach. But with every step closer, the price of knowing it was getting higher. And what he didn't yet realize was that someone very close to him, someone he still believed to be on his side, wasn't just part of the past. They were orchestrating the present. Watching. Guiding. Waiting for the moment to strike, Thompson stood frozen, the manila envelope in his hands, his heart pounding in his chest. The photographs were one thing, their threat undeniable, their purpose clear. But what truly rattled him was the final item at the bottom of the folder, a handwritten letter, scrawled in the same frantic ink that had marked the teacher's journal. It was short. To the point. And it felt like a bombshell, as if everything he had believed about this mystery was suddenly a lie. "You're not the first to dig here, and you won't be the last," it said. The locker was never meant to be found. What's inside is just the beginning of something far bigger. You've been played, just like the others. Don't make the same mistake. No name, no signature. Just a warning, cold and calculated. But it wasn't the words that haunted him, it was the weight of them, the chilling realization that this had never been a story about one missing teacher. Or one student. Or even a corrupt district official. This was about something that reached far beyond the walls of Jefferson High, and something was now being actively hidden by those at the very top. In a haze of adrenaline, Thompson gathered himself. He couldn't go back. The people who had already lost their lives or livelihoods in this twisted game had already paid the price. He wasn't going to back down now. But the question of who to trust was more dangerous than ever. Riley hadn't answered his calls. Rowe had already given him his warning. Alvarez was nowhere to be found, and no one else at the school had any answers except one person, Ms. Harris. Ms. Harris had always been quiet. A part-time teacher, a librarian who kept to herself and rarely spoke up at meetings, she had seemed inconsequential to Thompson. But recently, she had shown more interest in the investigation than anyone else, offering advice, providing him with old yearbooks, and even mentioning how she remembered things from the fire that didn't add up. Something about the way she did it made him think she knew more than she was letting on. Tonight, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was the last thread to pull. She would either confirm everything or unravel everything. He reached her office just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the hallways. He knocked twice before entering. But what he saw made him stop dead in his tracks. Ms. Harris wasn't sitting at her desk, where she usually worked. The room was empty, save for the faint sound of something rustling in the back. He called her name, but she didn't answer. His eyes scanned the shelves, books, boxes, nothing out of the ordinary. But as he approached the back of the room, a stack of papers on the floor caught his attention. The papers were all old administrative files. They were all stamped with confidential, and the names on them sent a chill through his spine. Some were of school board members. Others were of local officials. And right at the top of the pile was a file marked Project 12, a reference he had seen only once, in a memo buried deep in the school archives. It had been tied to an internal investigation that had been abruptly shut down 10 years ago, right around the time the teacher had disappeared. Suddenly, Thompson heard the sound of footsteps behind him. Spinning around, he saw Ms. Harris standing in the doorway, her expression calm, but her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite read. Then, she smiled faintly. "You were always too curious, Principal. And I told you the locker wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the mess." Thompson's blood ran cold as he stepped back. He wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that she had been orchestrating all of this from behind the scenes, or that she had been watching him the whole time, waiting for the moment to reveal herself. "What is all this?" he demanded, his voice rough, filled with a mix of betrayal and fear. "It's the truth," she said softly. "The thing no one ever wanted you to know. The thing that should have been buried, long before you came along." She stepped into the room, moving with a fluidity that made Thompson uneasy. "You think you're the first person to poke around, to uncover things you weren't meant to see? The truth, Principal, is that Jefferson High is just a piece of the puzzle. This place, this town, the fire, it's all connected to something much bigger than any of us." Thompson's mind raced. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Ms. Harris glanced down at the pile of papers and then back at him, her smile widening. "You know about Project 12, don't you? The covert initiative that started years ago. The one designed to shape the future, to change the direction of education in this entire region. They were using students' real lives, manipulating them, testing their limits, and yes, that teacher you've been chasing was one of them. But the project didn't end with them. Oh, no. It expanded." She paused, letting the words sink in, as if savoring the effect they were having on him. "There were always others. People in positions of power, people who were invested in controlling what happened to these kids, making sure they stayed in the system, kept in the dark. Even some of your colleagues, your trusted staff, they were involved. They just didn't know the full scope. And now you're the one who's gone too far." Thompson's heart thudded painfully in his chest. His world, the one he had built on trust, on doing what was right, was crumbling. This wasn't just about a teacher, or a lost student. This wasn't even about the fire or the locker. This was about a conspiracy that had festered beneath the surface for years, involving people he had believed to be good, honest people. And the worst part? He was now a pawn in that same game, caught in a trap he didn't even fully understand. "You're telling me," he started, his voice trembling with the weight of the truth, "that you've been manipulating me this entire time? That everything I've done, every move I've made, has been because you allowed it?" She took a slow breath, her eyes locked on his. "I'm not the villain in this story, Principal. I'm just the messenger. I'm the one who was chosen to keep you in line, to make sure you didn't go too far. But now you have to decide, are you really willing to sacrifice everything to expose the truth? Because once you do, there's no going back. The people behind this, they will destroy you. And they won't stop until you're gone." As she spoke, Thompson realized just how deep the roots of this conspiracy ran. It wasn't just his life on the line anymore, it was everything he had worked for, everything he had ever stood for. The decision before him was impossible. Did he push forward, knowing it could cost him everything? Or did he walk away and let the people behind this dark, twisted web of deceit continue their control over not just the school, but the entire community? And in the pit of his stomach, he knew, there was only one answer. The truth had to come out. No matter what the cost. The tension in the air felt like it was thick enough to cut with a knife as Thompson stood in the heart of the school's abandoned underground archives, surrounded by crumbling boxes, old filing cabinets, and the lingering scent of mildew and dust. The dim light from his flashlight flickered, casting long, jagged shadows across the room. He had followed the trail here, past locked doors, behind closed files, and through people he once trusted, only to discover this hidden chamber beneath the school, one that was never mentioned in the blueprints, a room buried deep beneath the administration wing. He knew this was it. This was the final step. But he wasn't alone. Ms. Harris had led him here, with that same calm expression, like she had all the answers, and she wasn't just content to watch him unravel the pieces of the puzzle, she wanted to be part of it. With every move he made, she had been right there, her eyes watching with that same unsettling look of quiet confidence. "It's over, Principal," she had told him as she guided him through the corridors. "You don't have the luxury of innocence anymore. You've uncovered too much." He could feel it now, the walls closing in on him. The people behind this Rowe, Alvarez, Riley had all been pieces in a much larger game, pawns in a dangerous chessboard. The truth wasn't just about corruption or cover-ups, it was about control, about shaping the future of an entire generation, manipulating their lives for a purpose he still couldn't fully comprehend. He had suspected as much, but standing here, in the heart of their secret, he realized just how far the conspiracy had spread. This wasn't just about Jefferson High. It was about something larger. It was about a covert network of influence, an elite group, pulling strings from the shadows, erasing history, erasing lives when they got in the way. Thompson's breath hitched as his gaze fell upon the center of the room, where a single desk sat, covered with papers, blueprints, records, photographs, all tied to a single name, Project 12. The files he had seen earlier were incomplete, fragmented. But here, in front of him, was the full scope of the operation. The true nature of the experiments, the names of students whose futures had been manipulated, the financial transactions that funded it, and most disturbingly, the evidence that the school itself was a testing ground for something far more insidious, an educational experiment, one that had been underway for over a decade, manipulating vulnerable students in ways no one would ever believe. His hands shook as he reached for the folder, flipping through the pages until he found the most damning piece of all, a list of names, some of them familiar, many of them alumni from years past. All marked with one chilling note: expendable. The experiment had never been about education. It had been about control. About shaping the future of those who could be molded into something the conspirators wanted, people who would eventually rise to power, people who could be controlled. Then, just as the weight of the revelation crashed over him, the door slammed shut behind him, and Ms. Harris stepped forward, her face betraying no emotion. "You should have walked away," she said, her voice soft, almost regretful. "You could have just stayed ignorant, let the past stay buried. But now you're part of this. You can't undo what's been done." Thompson stood frozen, the magnitude of what he had uncovered sinking in. You were in on this the whole time," he stammered, his mind still struggling to process it all. "You and Roe, and all of them. You used the school, you used me." "It's not that simple," she replied, her eyes cold, calculating. "We never wanted this to get out of control. But when you start digging, when you get too close, you leave us no choice." She motioned to the stacks of files on the desk, her expression hardening. "Do you think you're the first to challenge the system? You're not. But you might be the last." Thompson took a step back, his heart racing, and for the first time since this nightmare began, the full weight of what he was up against pressed down on him. These weren't just people hiding behind their desks, they were monsters in suits, people who had no qualms about destroying lives, manipulating entire generations, all for their vision of a future that only they could control. And now, with this final piece of evidence, the truth was clear: he had never stood a chance. But he also knew one thing: he wasn't going down without a fight. Without thinking, Thompson grabbed the nearest object, a heavy paperweight from the desk, and hurled it toward the door, shattering the lock. The loud crash echoed in the silence, and the noise seemed to break the tension in the air, like a match being struck in the dark. Ms. Harris flinched, just for a second, enough for Thompson to see her vulnerability. But it wasn't enough. Before he could move, before he could even react, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. And then, there was the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving closer. Thompson reached for his phone, but it was too late. A cold, metallic voice cut through the darkness. "You've been warned, Thompson. This is bigger than you, bigger than anything you could have ever imagined." It was Roe. His voice was eerily calm, like he had been waiting for this moment. "But you still don't understand. The truth isn't just something you uncover. It's something you're forced to live with." He may not have won the battle, but he had set the stage for someone else to do what he couldn't, someone else to finish what he had started. And as the doors to the school closed behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over yet. The conspiracy was far bigger than Jefferson High, bigger than anyone had ever realized. And in the distance, out of sight, out of mind, someone, maybe even something, was watching, waiting for the moment when the truth would finally come to light. The screen went dark, leaving the audience with one haunting question: what happens when the truth is finally exposed? And who, if anyone, will survive the fallout?